May 4, the government partially reopens public life with strict rules to guide the easing of the lockdown. While many could be seen with the masks, the rule on social distancing is negated, especially at bus stops.
You can see the crowd and everything, so it's becoming too much and we need to be very, very careful. That's what I advise Nigeria. Take for instance, when you're heading towards the isolation center, so when you see people there, the fear and everything, who would want to go there? So I feel the government should just, for now, this lockdown, they should not even ease it. And with the fear of all these Kano, states and everything, so for now, I just feel they should just continue with the lockdown.
When you see the area, many people are not still putting on masks. And when you watch the buses, there are too much people on it. If they can make the buses 30 people per seat, it's very okay. It will be safe for us.
Since when we are at lockdown, the number keep increasing. Releasing us to come out now is just like sending us on suicide mission.
President Muhammadu Buhari had announced a total lockdown on Lagos, Abuja and Ogun states at intervals for 4 weeks, keeping people locked in even though the directive was not totally heeded in some areas where many survive on daily proceeds or for fear of losing their jobs, especially those working with private organizations.
When we talk about workers, we talk about Nigerians. No sector is exempted. The entire economy is grinded, to the best of my knowledge. The lockdown itself to control the movement of the people first started at site. And as I speak, production is hot and activity at workplace is affected. And it's not funny. And workers are affected, especially when we're talking about the means to getting salary for the month of April. The performance of workers has been hindered by this COVID-19. Beyond that, you know, when we talk about stay at home, work from the house, it does not suit off it. Working from the house does not generate physical production. So as such, it's a challenge that eventually we can't wait to see the end.
The lockdown may have also threatened earnings from small businesses, but the highest threat is on workers' pay cut. This is vehemently resisted.
The move to cutting workers' salary is unacceptable. In the sense that the COVID-19, workers have been meant to create their own palliative in the environment. Don't forget, a worker employment is beyond his household. At a time like this, everybody is supporting government program in establishing to the extent that vulnerables get to getting this COVID-19 relief from workers. So I want to believe that workers who are supposed to be part of cushioning the effect of this COVID-19 lockdown in extension to these vulnerables cannot also be made vulnerable. Avoidance of payment of workers is like messing up the entire system. When you say workers should not get their full pay, you have already started sending signal to the economy that yet it was not well yesterday, but it's going to be worse tomorrow. When workers are affected, it means the vulnerable is facing death because the number will increase. By the time you give nothing or little to workers, you are turning the workers vulnerable as well. So the number will increase and government cannot. The capacity to take care of the entire country can never be found in the hand of employer. So it will be too early, too insensitive to talk about not getting our full salary in the earliest month. This is the first month of the lockdown. So it was very unpopular to begin to reason towards cutting of salaries. When they talk about appointees of government, we understand because even the bulk earning of these appointees does not lie on their salary. They get allowance, they get pay that take care of their constituents. So you can't compare these appointees with regular workers of government. No, private employers. So we have the opinion that employers should be encouraged to pay workers' salaries as palliative. See it, these are not casual workers. These are regular staffs who have been working, no fault of theirs. The economy has locked them in. It means that everybody, including the organization, is in trouble. A time will come, nobody is ignorant of the fact that no production will lead to no profit. Eventually, we believe that it is too early for any organization to consider the option of no pay. It will eventually affect the economy generally. This is the time for government to do review of where they have been, what are we getting wrong. People have projected that after the COVID, there may be massive reduction of workforce. We need to talk about the post-COVID-19 welfare of workers. What happened after COVID-19? We must stretch on our economy. We must assume that though paraventure discontinue for the next 2 years, man must live. Workers must find a way to do their work, and employers must also find a way to ensure that safety is observed in order that lives and properties are saved.
Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever. For the union makes us strong.
This year's May Day witnesses very few gathering, but the message is clear.
In management labor relationship, it is only the casual worker that is paid based on if you don't come to work today, you not legitimate. If you work in government establishments, especially those jobs that enjoy some statutory flavor, you work, whether you go to work or you don't go to work, for the days you don't go to work, based on your manager asking you not to come to work, you earn your pay. If you retire for the number of years you stay, you earn your pension and all that. So I don't think anybody should hide under that, especially when it is coming from government establishments or even state governments to come up with such policies. Is unheard of and will worsen the situation. If we are saying that the economy is down and needs to be restarted, if you ignite more crisis and there is shutdowns, I pray there will be no shutdown that will affect the critical sectors of the economy. If it affects it, the economy will be worse. So they should not provoke the workers and the unions by going to pay cuts for them to shut down the critical sectors, and then there will be no production. That will be worse. That is not how to recover from such economic quagmire. We will even be looking at the issue of insurance for those affected, those infected, even if they recover it, but they have passed through the psychological trauma for weeks or months. Those that may have lost their life, we look at it, we settle it first. Now there must be need, or there is need for COVID-19 allowance. We are going to insist on it for those who went out of their way to work within this period. There is need for that allowance. We are going to agitate for it, especially for those essential services, those sectors that are still running within this period of shutdown.
Personal protective equipment for the frontliners in combating COVID-19, to us, we will say is not enough. At the isolation centers, there are more than enough personal protective equipment for our members and other health workers to make use of. However, we need it to be extended to other units, to other hospitals, because these health workers identify this patient, the asymptomatic patient and the symptomatic patient, before referral is made to the isolation center. This also need attention. They need to be well kitted. They need to be well protected. So the personal protective equipment must be extended to them so as to be able to fight and prevent this community transmission. Because if one individual health worker is affected, automatically it will go down to the family, to the community, and to the entire state.
After a 5-week recess, the Senate resumes plenary as senators adopt the new normal, maintaining social distancing. The Senate President gives a welcome address, harping on the need to sustain the efforts to contain the pandemic from spreading further and causing a health crisis.
Citizens need to comply with measures like use of facial masks and reduction in movements until the virus is gone. It is also important we educate them on the guidelines and protocols of the National Center for Disease Control on reporting suspected cases. The task before us is imperative, and the responsibility of the legislator is even more important because of our closeness to the people. The pandemic has affected our budget for this year, not just because of falling oil prices, but also because it has forced a reduction in economic activities, leading to an enormous loss of revenue. We are confident that we shall soon overcome this crisis like previous health emergencies. All hands will therefore have to be on deck to register a quicker and more resounding success.
He reads a letter from the President seeking approval for a fresh loan of 850 billion naira from the domestic capital market to ensure adequate funding of the 2020 budget.
I want to put the question, those in favor of the motion that we approve the request of Mr. Presidency in C, that the foreign borrowing be 850 billion naira for the executive to implement the budget 2020, say aye. Those against, say nay. The ayes have it.
A motion to review the national response to COVID-19 begins with focus on the social and economic impact of the lockdown.
I think that from the onset, if we had had a coordination like we're doing today, where states are keen in, I think we would have tamed it a little bit, because if states had agreed from day one, which I thought was going to be what would have happened, that there is a total lockdown, and then we'll have started from there, and then gradually we can release, and then gradually we can come back to normal.
We've been carrying up and down rice, tomato, and all that as a war of palliatives. When we will have problem is when the entire lockdown is eased out. How do we deal with it as our SMEs that form the chunk of our business environment?
With the enormity of the challenges facing all of us today, we have seen that we have not done much as a country. We are using this opportunity to urge the executive to allocate money where it is much needed.
At the Green Chamber, almost every lawmaker is wearing a mask.
This is no time for politics or the consideration of minor things. This is a time for selfless service, for courage and determination to make the critical decisions necessary to survive this pandemic and shape a better future for us. Honorable colleagues, none of us expected that our tenure of service will include these extraordinary times. We did not foresee the challenges we now face and must overcome. But we know that this is a time for statesmen who are willing to do what is hard and make the difficult choices from which greatness is born. I call on this Honorable House to, with one accord, boldly act in whatever ways we must to protect our people from the immediate ravages of hunger, disease, death, and economic devastation.
The only bill for consideration is for an act to repeal the Quarantine Act of 2004 to suit modern realities. The bill seeks to increase the penalty for violating the Quarantine Act. One of the lawmakers does not seem to agree with the move. He calls for a restraint.
The urgency we need now, Mr. Speaker, is providing solution the cure of COVID-19. This bill is a long-term case, not immediate cure. On that note, I am saying that we should apply the wisdom of direction. Can we circulate even this bill? Even for the reasons of crossing the T's and dotting the I's, I have not seen it. From the paper here, it was introduced the first reading today. We're doing the second reading, the provision for the third reading, and what? The speed, in this speed, we may miss the direction and turn back again to seek direction. We've been told that there's going to be a chip. In fact, that the vaccine is here already. So when we put in the chip, the monitors from UK, from US, what we are doing in our rooms and whatever. And now, there's a portion now saying NCDC will even have a right to order these things. That was why, Mr. Chair, you observed me shaking and wondering and perplexed.
The bill scales through second reading, but is deferred to the next sitting to allow members study it properly. There is a daily increase in the number of positive COVID-19 cases, with Lagos leading the pack. Even though civil servants in the state have been asked by the government to stay away from work in order to flatten the curve of the pandemic, other workers must return to work to keep their jobs. The government is struggling to have enough test kits in an era where every other government's focus is on their citizens and not ready to share by closing the border of supplies. According to the PTF, the Alternative Medicines Department of the Ministry of Health has submitted some traditional medicines to NAFDAC to carry out the necessary procedures for listing.
The Nigeria Center for Disease Control routinely replenishes stocks of personal protective equipment to state emergency operation centers and the federal tertiary health institutions to ensure that our health workers are protected. But I also take the opportunity to again appeal to all healthcare professionals and associated personnel to diligently follow safety, infection prevention and control protocols, both inside and outside health facilities, and not to indulge in unauthorized treatment of COVID-19 cases.
The Director General of NCDC recognizes the impact of the pandemic on small-scale businesses. He says the agency has published guidelines for business to continue to exist and be safe.
COVID-19 has no doubt had a very huge impact on our economy. That impact on the economy inadvertently also has an impact on health, because if people are not able to work, they're not able to earn a living, and they're not able to fulfill all their health needs. So there's a very strong link between economy and health. So by allowing certain parts of the economy to restart, we're also trying to achieve a health benefit. You would all know that many aspects of the economy have been hit very hard. And people work in these places. The Honorable Minister for Aviation described the impact of the measures that we've had to endure on his sector. And there are many other sectors in the Nigerian economy that have been hit. But no aspect of the economy has been hit as much as small and medium-scale enterprises, because this is really where most of Nigerians work. And we have to support them in surviving, because if they don't survive, people lose work. If they lose work, they don't pay attention to their health, and our job becomes a lot more difficult.
Some of the guidelines include hygiene strategies, provision of sanitizers for customers, among others.
We've advised, some of them are obvious, that every business should invest a little bit in hand-washing facilities and sanitizers. These are small things that are not hugely resource-intensive, but they can save lives. And we're not just talking about the corporates. I'm talking about the guy that owns a small shop selling foodstuff. There's no reason why you can't invest in a small bottle of sanitizer. So if your customers come to you, say, listen, before we transact this, I sell plantain to you this afternoon, please let me make sure your hands are clean. Small things like that that can save lives. In offices, display signages reminding staff about the need to wash their hands. We're all human. We will forget. So small prompts to remind us about when and how we should wash our hands. Staggering working hours, or deciding, listen, this group of staff, you work today, the other group, you work tomorrow. It is better than closing your business altogether. So think innovatively about how to stagger your working times. Whether it's during the day or alternate days, it's up to you to make the right decisions for your own staff. Developing physical distancing strategies in your offices. The 2 meters apart is a very generic rule. We then expect you to adapt it to your own circumstance, in your own office, or your own work environment. Not everybody works in offices.
But for the national coordinator of the PTF, His concern is over the non-compliance of many with the health advisories.
We had a lockdown of Lagos, Ogun and FCT for 5 weeks in order to slow down the epidemic and enable us to prepare well. The gains of this lockdown could be destroyed if people continue to violate the guidelines that we have set out. Essential workers are exempt from movement during the eased lockdown. Security agencies are invited to please take note and ensure that people on essential duty, such as healthcare workers, the press, and drivers moving essential goods and services are allowed to move around without harassment.
While the guidelines for those on essential duties are restated, there may be a threat to getting medical care by resident doctors at the University of Medical Sciences in Akure and Ondo Town. The frontline workers threaten drastic action if their plea fails to heed.
I can say that I'm highly perturbed and perplexed. If at this era of COVID-19 pandemic all over the world, we all know how doctors have been celebrated all over the world, and now have been encouraged to prosecute the war of this COVID-19. But the case is opposite here. As I'm talking to you now, as a person, I'm being owed about 4 months' salary. Arrears from last year. This year alone, I'm being paid only February salary, excluding the 9 days in January. And we have had a series of meetings with important people, both within the government circle and with the management of the institution. But there is no hope in sight. They kept giving up promises. We can't continue to live our life like this. This is a resident training. We can't cope, we can't continue, we can't sit down to prepare for our training. And we hold 5 months' salary. And we have some of our colleagues that are yet to get September, October salaries, including January, April, and March 2020. So when you put it together, you discover that some of us are being owed 3 months' salary, some are being owed 4 months' salaries, and some are being owed 5 months' salary. There's no any explanation that can surface to a medical doctor that have worked for 4 months, 5 months, and yet they are not being paid salary. What explanation can surface for that? So to me, there is no explanation that is tenable. In fact, they shouldn't give any explanation. They shouldn't give any reason for owing a medical doctor. And so we are giving the government and the management 1 week ultimatum to settle this issue of salary, to move on from this quagmire, to solve this logjam of salaries and irregularities. And if after 1 week nothing happened, we are left with no option than to down tools, because it will become practically impossible for our colleagues to meet up with the demands and the rigors of both providing for their family and the duties at place of work.
We've had series of meetings to have an amicable resolution to this problem. We've written series of letters to our management and to the people concerned. We've exploited all the means of negotiation, but at this point, it is increasingly becoming difficult to persecute this war as frontline health workers, the COVID-19 pandemic. I must tell you that in this year alone, we've just been paid 1 month and 9 days. How do you persecute such a war? We are not motivated, we are not properly kitted for this job. It is unacceptable.